Welcome back to SB Nation. I'm Brad Wells, and for 30 of the 32 teams in the NFL, they are approaching the most important game of preseason, the third preseason game. The reason this game is important is because starters are going to play well into the third quarter, coaches are simulating practice as if it were a regular season game, and guys are fighting for roster spots because after this preseason game, teams make their first major roster cut down. Now, we focused on 5 key storylines headed into this third preseason game, and here they are. The first key storyline is the quarterback situation in Seattle. You have Matt Flynn versus Russell Wilson. Now, Matt Flynn was signed in the offseason to a 3-year deal with $10 million guaranteed. Russell Wilson was drafted in the 3rd round out of Wisconsin. Now, coming into this third preseason game, Pete Carroll has named Russell Wilson the starter for the game against the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just because Russell Wilson was named the starter for this game does not mean he's going to be the starter week 1. However, if Russell Wilson plays well, that's going to be a feather in his cap to become that starting quarterback week 1. Financially, it makes more sense to have Matt Flynn play because you're paying him all this money. But if Russell Wilson plays well in this game, that's a pretty compelling argument for him to be your starting quarterback, regardless of how much money you've given Matt Flynn. So watching that storyline in Seattle is going to be very key. The second key storyline going into the third preseason game is the saga of Maurice Jones-Drew in Jacksonville. Maurice Jones-Drew is holding out. He's been holding out all throughout preseason and all throughout training camp. The fines that he's incurred through this holdout are in excess of $1 million, according to a report from Yahoo Sports. And Shad Khan, the new owner of the Jaguars, is not budging. Maurice Jones-Drew camp has let it be known that he's open to a trade, but who's going to trade for him? Not only would you have to give the Jaguars the compensation that they want, but you'd have to pay Maurice Jones-Drew what he's looking to get paid. His current contract has 2 years remaining and it's front-loaded. So when it's all said and done, Jones-Drew has no leverage or leeway here. He has to show up and play. And when he does show up and play, what kind of condition is he going to be in? Ideally, you want him to show up before that 4th and final preseason game. It's going to be interesting to see how this situation hangs over the Jaguars. I think they'll be fine going into the third preseason game and going into the regular season opener without Jones-Drew. But if he's still not signed, that distraction is going to hang over the whole team. The third key storyline is the New York Jets and their anemic offense, in particular their quarterback play. Both Mark Sanchez and Tim Tebow have not played well this preseason. Interesting stat on Tebow, he is averaging more yards rushing, 6.5 a carry, than he is throwing, 4.4 yards per completion. Thing is, Sanchez isn't doing too well either. He's only averaging 4.7 yards a completion. Neither one of them has thrown a touchdown or run for a touchdown, and both of them have thrown interceptions. At the end of the day, going into the third preseason game, it's a pretty good idea if your team actually scores points, in particular touchdowns. And the Jets and their quarterbacks need to do that. If they don't, then the fact that they're not scoring is going to be a major storyline going into the 4th preseason game and into the regular season opener. Fourth key storyline are quarterbacks potentially being traded, in particular Colt McCoy in Cleveland and Tarvaris Jackson in Seattle. And we've already talked about the other Seattle quarterbacks. The interesting thing about Tarvaris Jackson is he was their starter last year and played pretty well. He's got trade value. If both of these guys coming into the third preseason game play well, in particular Colt McCoy, who is at home against the Philadelphia Eagles, then their trade value goes up, way up. One team that is a potential suitor for McCoy or a trade partner for McCoy is the Green Bay Packers. They have not been happy with their backup quarterback play, and if you lose Aaron Rodgers, you pretty much lose your whole season. If you have Colt McCoy on the Packers, maybe you can salvage your season a little bit. The final key storyline is injuries. At the end of the day, preseason is about avoiding injuries at all costs. We've already seen several injuries that have been significant. Already, Michael Vick has injured his thumb, and he's got bruised ribs. Brian Urlacher has a knee issue, and Adrian Peterson is slowly being brought back from his knee ailments that he suffered from last year. So what you want to do in this third preseason game is just avoid injuries whenever possible. Starters are going to play in the third quarter, but once that third quarter, first 2 or 3 series in the third quarter, get your starters out there, because if you lose starters in your third preseason game, you got big problems. So those are the 5 key storylines for the third preseason game. What do you think? What are your storylines? Subscribe above, comment below. A lot of football coming in the next few days. We'll see you then.